Good morning. I'm Denise Dryden, and I'm talking to you today on the 21st of August, which is also 5 years ago was um, I don't want to say the eclipse. It was the eclipse that came across the United States, and I've got my eclipse T-shirt on because I was in Stanley, Idaho, at the line of the direct line, and the shadow went right over. It was amazing. So 5 years ago, some really interesting things happened to us. It was almost as if that eclipse sort of awakened something in us. And, it makes sense to me that this is a really big topic for today, which is, let's take helicoptering and let's take the narcissistic personality and let's put those two together. And it seems to me like today is the day that we want to talk about that because it's big energy. Before we get going on that, though, I want to ask you to like and subscribe because I'm trying to get my numbers up so that I can do some posting on YouTube as well. And I need to get to 500. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. Second thing is that if you haven't purchased the Indigo Assignment yet, I think it's a good book. I think you should do it because we're going to, Lisa Gunter and I, on the 26th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, we're going to do our final, our ninth and final conversation, or eighth and final conversation on the indigo. And we're going to talk about children and parenting. And how do you know if your kid's an indigo? And what do you do with indigo energy as a parent? And there's an entire section, part 4, that's dedicated towards indigo gifts and raising them, right? And it's going to be good. So anyway, I invite you to get that book if you haven't already. It's available on Kindle and on paperback through Amazon. So let's get going. Helicoptering is interesting because this is the third part, something that I've been talking about. The first part was the energetics of helicoptering. What happens when we get into somebody else's field and we start teaching them that no matter what they do, we're going to help manage them. We're going to get them through, right? The second one last week was all about tools on how to stop helicoptering. What do you do if you've been helicoptering and it just won't stop? Hovering, taking care of, overly invested, codependent in this parent-child relationship or this other, adult-adult relationship, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the complexities of what it's like when narcissism is present, because the energetic challenges of when we're giving and we're helping and we're loving a loving adult, and when narcissism is present in that partnership or that relationship, it multiplies exponentially, right? It's just it blows up in something that's much larger than we would have thought it would be. So first, that helicopter adulting, that, when I'm not really fond of the term helicopter. When someone called me a helicopter parent, I was kind of like, you die, right? But at the same time, it was true. And so if it's true, and if we know that there's something where we're externally driven and we want to control or help or do something to help the external become a little bit easier, there's this dependency on my field into your field, right? And we are conditioned to read others, to react, to help, to give. It's something that is in our nature. And our nervous system has high levels of anxiety, worry, fear. And we're doers. We're doers for others because we have all this energy and there's something that we need to give. We also are compensatory energy systems, which is I'm running at 150% and you're running at 30. So let me give you some of my energy so that you can thrive, whether it's in high school, getting a kid through middle school or high school, whether it's getting a husband a job after they've lost one, whatever it is, right? It's where we are compensatory. And I think often we mistake leadership for that kind of partnership. Like maybe we think that that's actually how we lead the world and we feel very accomplished because we're really good helpers. So enter the narcissist, right? So the way that I'm going to define narcissism, because it's a term that's batted all over the place, and it's in the DSM as a personality disorder, and yet at the same time, it takes a really refined diagnosis to figure out what levels of narcissism might be going on, or what's actually happening. So I'm going to caution you not to keep throwing this around with when you don't like someone, you call them a narcissist. But let's really look at what it is to be a narcissist. So basically, they're internally focused, which means that they're preoccupied with their own needs. Their world is like, I just have to take care of this, and they're internal. And everything external, people, places, and things, are things that can be moved around to make this feel better. Does that make sense? Or to feel more comfortable, or to feel in control. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of abandonment issues in here. And this internal focus is dependent on the external, because if the external doesn't perform and doesn't provide, then this internal system goes into lack and goes into identifying and creating more external forces or external sources, right? So what I'm going to say, and this is my perspective, is that the narcissist harvests energy. Their focus is here and their energy is internal, but that means that they're not collaborating and they're not building and they're not interacting with others unless they can control the scenario. So what happens is that they harvest energy on a daily basis from whoever will give it to them. So they like to pick really successful, abundant, beautiful, well accomplished humans to be around, because they make them look good and because they can feed them when they take care of them, when they do things that make it feel easier, right? So it's an exploitative relationship. There's a desire to have someone in their lives, but they have someone in their lives because they need them and they need their energy. They have they're highly intelligent, they're manipulative, they're arrogant, they can almost be sort of haughty, like, you haven't figured that out yet. So sometimes they'll even put down others, because when we have our feelings hurt, we exude energy like, ouch. And what I'm noticing is that there's a cause and effect, which is if a narcissist can hurt someone in that, or say something, and there's a reflex of pain, that there's more energy coming in. So if we take it out of right or wrong or personalities or anything and look at it from an energetic position, there's an energetic independence, yet dependence on an outside food source, energy source. And that if you can do something to the outside, it will create more energy, and then you have more to harvest. And I think the piece that we want to put our finger on the most is that highly intelligent, sort of intuitive, very, very intuitive reader is always looking for the next food source or the next source of energy. And there's a lack of external empathy. So anything that may hurt your feelings, cause and effect, it's kind of like, get over it. That's life. And so what we have is a person who's in a dependent need situation, combined with a helicopter person who's in a dependent give situation. Does that make sense? So their view is all about what you can do for them. And I think it's interesting because uh, what I've noticed is that when narcissists are in relationship, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a love relationship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it's a business relationship, whether it's even siblings, right? Is that they can get really competitive, because it's like, oh, no, 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 don't, that's my source. You need to go find your own source, right? And then they're also really jealous. So if you take your attention elsewhere, you get really busy in something else, and you're not giving them as much attention, they get jealous and they get mean, and they need you to come back. And it's interesting because we're seeing them, especially if we're empathic, especially if we're generous with our energies, we're seeing the wound, we're seeing the needfulness, and we actually see this as love. So we're having a love relationship with someone who's harvesting our energy. It's really interesting. So our culture has sort of trained us to give and to be community oriented and to be in committed relationships, right? And that this personality type has used this for their own benefit. And so as they harvest energy, these marriages, these long-term partnerships that are unequal in status in their mind have a benefit for them. And I think the piece that I want to add to this, which is new for me to talk about, is what happens when children are born into this system. So when children are born into the system of the overgiver and the taker, right? Let's just call it that, the giver and the taker. Um, the children pattern and they learn to be the giver or the taker. And so they learn that that's how they survive. They model, replicate, they create whatever serves their energetics system. And sometimes I wonder if it's genetic, if it's energetically like a lineage karma, if it's created, if it's learned. But what I know is that whatever we're doing is duplicated in our children. So we may not like our this partner we chose. We may even end the relationship and separate from them, but our children are also going to reflect all of that give or take energy system that they've duplicated. So whether it's hovering or helping or, we're going to see that we're going to hover because now we're worried about them because they're not self-starting or they're dependent on external energy, right? And then we have this compensating, which is what happens if they're just shy or they're slow at starting school or they have some learning challenges that aren't working for them. And then we become compensatory. And then we start to build the same, sort of pattern again on recycling this dependency on the external, which is you. So this energetic pattern within relationships and family systems that duplicates and goes doom to doom to and repetitive because mother, father, down to children, down to mother, father, and it just repeats itself constantly. So we've talked about how to stop controlling the external world in the original, work that I did in the last 2 weeks on being a helicopter, right? Stop providing energy and influence with that human, that young human, that partner, whatever let's be specific, to that seventh grader who's not doing well in middle school, to that husband or wife or partner who is in addiction model and struggling or isn't really fitting into their environment, right? So then we go directly into our dependence. But when we look at it from the narcissistic perspective, this is big, big stuff. And it takes a lot of understanding that you're breaking a very deep pattern. Okay. So I have 4 tips and I want to go through them and then sign off. And of course, if you have more questions, you can contact me. This is this thing I coach a lot with is that imbalance in the empath and narcissist and how to break some of these patterns that exist in family systems. So number 1 is to assess how far you are outside your field. Am I in my field or have I gone all the way into his field or her field to try to help, right? And then you have to pull yourself back in. And there's a term I use constantly, came from the movie All of Me with Steve, I can't remember his last name. It's hilarious. Anyway, I go back in bowl. Like this is my field. This is my container. Get back in my bowl. Get back in my field, right? And I stay out of the other person's field. So that's the first thing, is to know that you're out and to know how far you are out and then to know what you can do to get back. So it's like get back in your field. Number 2, when you get back in your field, prepare for bad behavior. Be prepared for reactions from the other, because if you've been hovering, let's just say, let's go back to the 7th grader who's not doing well in middle school, and you've been helping all the way through 4th, 5th, 6th grade to get them into middle school, right? Whatever. And you go back into your field and you don't help that person, that beautiful little cherub, that 7th grader, right? You can expect bad behavior. You can expect that their dependence on you has now been affected. Now let's amp that up and go into a very arrogant, demanding, love partner, or adult relationship, right? You just cut off their dependency on you. You cut off their food chain for harvesting energy. There's going to be anger. There's going to be fear. There's going to be hurt. There might even be retaliatory behavior, tantrums, punishments. Well, if you're not going to do, yeah, you don't even care about me anymore. So I'm going to stop paying this, or I'm going to stop doing this. And there are even attacks, which is you are a horrible person, because what happens is the projection of their pain goes on to you, right? So when what they might even take back what they have given to you, whether it's money or gifts or cars. I've got stories for you. And you can expect extreme reactions with no empathy for how it affects you. There's a lack of empathy. So when you pull yourself back into your field, you can expect, number two, bad behavior. It's really interesting. It's like watching a 2-year-old when you take a toy out of their hands, or you take some food away from them that they've had enough. They're like, wow, you can't do that, right? Number three, no matter what happens, stay in your field. This is what really we're talking about when we say boundaries. We don't leave our field because they're hurt or they're angry or we're placating them and we need them to calm down and get nice again, right? So when you stay in your field and you hold this boundary, and then you speak only of yourself, you say, I'm going to, I will, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm going to do. If you're using an I statement, you're holding a boundary. If you're doing a you statement, you're in blame and shame and all of that, right? So there will be attempts to re-engage. That's the thing to keep, in mind. Once you pull out of their field, there's going to be attempts. So if there's any string, whether it's that you work together, that you sit down once a week and work on homework or bills or whatever the scenario needs from you, right? Or whether you are in a lot of cases co-parenting, um, any string that's left open and undefined is a string that can be pulled to re-engage into that energy siphoning, which is what the narcissist needs from the helicopter, right? Does that make sense to you? And there will be promises made, and there will be apologies, and there will be a lot. I promise I'm not going to do that again. And it will be very short lived because, again, this is a dependency on energy. And as we know, when that energy source is removed, we will do anything, especially if we have a sense that we are in peril, that we are in pain, that we are unable to survive, right? And number four, after you've pulled back, and sometimes you can pull back a little bit and watch what happens, and you can do this in terms or in short terms, or you can, like pull back hard one time and watch what happens. It may mean that you need to leave the relationship. And if you need to leave the relationship, you need to terminate it. You need to shut it down and cut all ties, because any of those strings are re-engagements, right? So you may be the only one who sees this. You may be the only one who feels this. You may be the only one who's experiencing the harvesting and the dependency, and you can't explain it. You can't explain it to your parents. You can't explain it to your children. You can't explain it to your friends. A lot of times, my experience is that therapists, legal attorneys, judges, children's services, all of these agencies that are there to help us out with this do not have an energetic understanding of what happens with the strings. So they're saying, oh, yeah, of course you can co-parent and do a 50-50 split on all decisions. That isn't going to work when you're trying to hold a boundary on, I'm not going to let you in my field and harvest my energy anymore. It's very interesting. So you may need to let go of a lot of things in order to get out. So holding your field, deciding what comes with you, and advocating for that is an exhausting big project. And at the end, you end up knowing who you are, what your field is, and where you've overgiven, where you've overcompensated. And then I think the last piece, and I'm going to add this, it's not on my notes, would be number 5, is that this process of giving and helping somebody when they're struggling, leaving our field to go give energy to someone else, is is a deep pattern, and it will be replicated and started. I had a therapist tell me when I first started working with her that I've got the word host across my forehead, which means that I'm a really easy target for someone who's looking for harvest, for energy to harvest, until I had to pull back and learn how to stay in my field and how to protect my field and keep that away. So know that it's going to take some practice, and that any job you take, any new relationship you take, even the way that you are parenting your children, if you step back, is going to have the repetitive, sort of like, oh, I think I need to start hovering again or helping, and to pull it back. Okay. So this is the kind of thing that I've been really playing with a lot, which is how the energy works between systems, and to help you understand it so it gets less personal, and it's really just about understanding energy, and moving it from one place to the other, transforming it the way we want it to be. So if you would like more information, you'd like to contact me, you can find me at denisdryden.com. And don't forget to tune in on the 26th at 2 p.m. here on YouTube for Lisa Gunshore and I, as we do our last Indigo assignment. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.